Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike.shop. Welcome back to Story Time with Chris James. This will be part number 6 of The Bag Company. Mr. Armstrong waved to the two officers as he flashed by. I think those two are going to want to have a conversation with me. You two jump out and see if you can get a line on Waldo. Try not to lose him. He said all this as he slid to a stop right in front of the doors Waldo had disappeared through. With lights flashing, the police car slid in behind him, and Mr. Armstrong jumped out before the officers get their doors open. Pam and Sarah jumped out and ran into the mall. Sarah immediately began looking at all the cool things on display in the shop windows. Pam tugged on her sleeve. He went that way. How can you tell? Well, look at all the shoppers. They're going the opposite direction. This was true. And nothing much will clear out a shopping center aside from a bright green guy running around knocking displays over. As several people were screaming, others were too stressed to make a sound. Mothers were clutching their children to their arms as they fled. Teens were clutching their cell phones. You have to know your priorities. The workers had fled by way of the back doors used for deliveries. Sarah began running along behind Pam. What do we do if we catch him? Pam considered the question. We'll stay back and call for reinforcements. I like Mr. Armstrong? No, I was thinking more like the Army National Guard. Don't you ever watch TV? The Army only shows up once the evil thing has been dispatched by the overly creative teen heroes. Pam remembered seeing several movies that all followed this same plot. Okay, then we call Mr. Armstrong to come save the day. He really saved the day at Waldo's house. He was blindsided. Pam wondered why she was taking Mr. Armstrong's defense. They continued trotting along. Soon the two girls became aware of the fact no one else was in the mall aside from them and Demon Waldo. Pam looked around in the deserted shopping center. This is weird. As long as the lights stay on, we're in good shape. The lights went out. It got dark fast. Not dark like the basement, but dark enough to be creepy and unnerving. Sarah grabbed Pam's arm. Now what? Just above a whisper. Pam considered something she'd heard one time while trying to learn her history lesson and watch Ancient Aliens at the same time. The best part of valor is knowing when to run. Or was it, he who fights and runs away lives to fight another day? She turned back the way they had come. Let's go see how Mr. Armstrong is doing with the law. Something crashed to the floor in front of them. Pam froze. Okay, let's see if we can get out of here without getting killed by the demon. She began to run away from the sound of destruction. Pam soon began to hate the fact she was once more inappropriate footwear for any kind of a mad dash to freedom. The heels she had grabbed made a click-click-click sound as she went. As the two began to race away from what they presumed was the demon, making a mess out of the store stuff, the sounds of destruction began to follow. Running through the dark was not a good idea, but neither was standing still and letting Demon Waldo catch them. Why is it so dark? There should be light coming in through the skylights, right? Sarah had to gasp her questions, since they were trying for a PB run. For those of you that don't run, a PB is known as a personal best or a pit bull run. Lots of runners use this term so they can confuse those of you that don't lace up and pound the pavement. Oh, and Sarah was attempting her talk test. A talk test is making a complete sentence without gasping for breath, used to determine if you're running too fast, which she was. Running too fast, that is. Pam looked up and wondered why it was so dark. Maybe the sky is overcast. Out in the parking lot, Mr. Armstrong was having a good laugh with the two officers. Once they found out who he was and why he was doing the things he was doing, they figured it was well within the color of the law to just forget any violations they have mistakenly observed. And then this guy told me, my taxes pay your salary, so you better. They stopped talking and looked up at the sky. That's weird. The sky had grown dark. It looked as if a storm had just formed over the roof of the shopping mall. All along the edges, the sun could be seen shining and happy. This doesn't look good. What was it you were pursuing again? A demon. Mr. Armstrong patted the 40 cal pistol under his arm, just to make sure it was okay. And your demon is inside the mall? The two cops were having second and third thoughts about sticking around. Mr. Armstrong had already had his third thought. I have two associates in there looking for it right now. The younger of the two cops asked, you think you'll be able to handle this? You know, you don't really need us, do you? He looked at his watch. Oh, look at the time. His partner poked him in the arm and shook his head. Oh, what do you need from us? Mr. Armstrong was obviously the man in charge of this unexplainable scene. Mr. Armstrong considered his options. Get a unit, a couple units on every exit, and nothing green or demonic gets out without a few extra pounds of lead. Her turned to the trunk of his truck. Once more, those of you not in the know, a Honda Ridgeline has a nice cool trunk mounted inside the bed of the pickup. Way cool idea. It also doubles as a cooler. Opening the trunk, he pulled a Saga 12-gauge automatic shotgun with a drum magazine. He also slung a pouch over his shoulder with a few more drums, just in case. Just in case the 20 rounds of 12-gauge double-aught buck failed to take down Demon Waldo. Mr. Armstrong straightened his suit, and then he headed for his appointment with destiny. Well, he went to the double doors Pam and Sarah had gone through just minutes before. Mr. Armstrong was about to kick the door open, but thinking better of it, he pulled the door open and went inside into the unknown. Too dramatic? Pam had to stop and catch her breath. Sarah was trying to catch anything. For the last few minutes, Pam had been dragging the tween along behind her. We have to find a way out of here. I don't remember this place being this big. Sarah was trying to breathe and not pass out. They had come to a halt right next to a running store called Run Like Well. Pam looked at the display and then down at her feet. Her feet were telling her running in heels will get you killed, or at least broken ankle. She looked once more at the running store. On display. Give me a second, she released Sarah's arm. Sarah promptly slipped to the floor and just laid there. Pam grabbed a pair off the shelf. Size 14? As she looked at the others and found her size, kicking off her heels, she quickly laced up and looked down at the bright pink trainers. Her conscience began to poke at her. That's stealing. No, it's not. It's survival. Thief. Stop it. I'll come back and pay later. Now you're lying, too. Sarah, how much cash do you have with you? $895.23. Why? Can I borrow $100? Pam looked at the price tag. And $50? Now you're spending money you don't have. Sarah handed over a few bills, not bothering to ask why or when or anything. Act your wage. Now, Pam ran over to the cash register and scribbled a note saying, shoes needed, took, here's money. She set her heels down next to the note and then ran back to get Sarah. Let's go, the demon is getting closer. Pam got Sarah back on her feet and took to running. Now her feet weren't hurting and her footsteps made squishy sounds. A demon Waldo could smell his adversaries. He could tell they were near. He considered swooping down on them and devouring them as two tasty snacks, but then he reconsidered. It would be far better to chase them around a bit, let them think they were escaping, and then snatch them from the edge of freedom. That would make their demise so much sweeter. The demon was pleased with this latest human. The others had been so dumb they would have found it impossible to find their way out of a closet. This guy was different. He could be used. His brain was more than just something to keep the vacuum from whistling through his ears. This Waldo was enjoying being possessed as much as the demon was enjoying it. This looks like the beginning of a beautiful friendship. The demon continued pursuing the two young girls. Pam thought they should find the nearest exit. Come to think of it, they should have run out of mall a long time ago. I think we're in some kind of a trans-dimensional labyrinth. Wow, that would explain why the shopping center goes on forever. Sarah had been wondering about this never-ending shopping nightmare. So how do we escape? I don't know. Pam looked around and then had another idea. In here, we might be able to use the service exit. Pam knew there were doors used by delivery and employees in the rear of every store. They just needed to find one. They made their way past racks of fancy shoulder bags and hoity-toity bling. The store would have been paradise to Pam at one time. Now all she saw were cheap purses and gaudy knickknacks. There should be a door right there. Pam pointed at a blank section of the wall. She looked left and then right. The wall wasn't that big. She should be able to see the door from here. How is this possible? I've been in this store 100 times. There was a door here just last month. Pam ran her hand along the shoe rack, hoping to feel the door she couldn't see. There was a loud crash from the front of the store. We're trapped in here. Pam saw the darkness moving in the darkness out front. The darkness was huge. It filled the front of the store. The shelves all burst apart. Purses and accessories went in every direction. Sarah freaked out some more. I don't want to become a demon meal. She kicked at the wall. Her small foot left a scuff mark across the white paint. She kicked again. Then she really got going. Her leg swung back and shot forward. The toe of her shoe punched a small hole through the wall. Pam saw a way out. Harder, we just might make it. Pam tried to kick the wall while Sarah was pulling back for her next assault. Pam's foot made a bigger hole, and then Sarah's foot bounced off the back of Pam's foot. Their legs got tangled up, and they both crashed to the floor. Sarah, get up, or at least get off of me. Pam tried to push Sarah and tried to stand. Neither one was doing much good. An explosion filled the room. It was quickly followed by several more. Mr. Armstrong stood in the entry, squeezing off 12-gauge shot after 12-gauge shot. He had a blinding light attached to the barrel of his shotgun, and it lit up the thing that Pam wished she hadn't seen. The demon was 9 feet tall and dark green. Its skin looked like it was moving about on its own. His face had too many teeth, and they all looked sharp. Pam closed her eyes to make this apparition go away. It kind of worked. She could no longer see it. A demon Waldo was unimpressed till the burning pain reached his brain. With each shot, his body felt as if jalapeno juice was being squeezed into a paper cut. Ouch, that hurts. A lot. A demon Waldo began to retreat, not much caring for the burning sensation that grew with each shot. Pam managed to get Sarah off her chest and up against the wall. She hadn't planned to use her body to protect the tween, but it just kind of happened. Chunks of drywall and pieces of purse flew through the air, raining down on the two huddled girls, making a small pile of colorful waste. Pam couldn't help think, once the demon got to them, it would eat her first. Mr. Armstrong began to advance, pressing the threat, driving the demon back towards the rear wall, back where the two girls were trying to hide. He next began pushing it to the side wall and finally back towards the concourse outside this fancy, well, it had been fancy till the demon and then Mr. Armstrong had turned it into a smoldering pile of refuse. Anyway, Mr. Armstrong drove Demon Waldo out the entry and back into the main building. The last piece of glass crashed to the floor as it left. The air was thick with burning gunpowder and smoldering handbags. The burning gunpowder kind of smelled good, but was quickly outflanked by the smell of burning plastic. Soon the store was filled with a greenish smoke that just couldn't be healthy to inhale. That's when the sprinklers kicked in. Pam and Sarah managed to dig their way out from under a pile of handbags and other detritus, only to become drenched as the sprinkler worked to put out the small flames. The water did more damage than the flames ever would. Mr. Armstrong looked as if he were smiling. "You two kids okay?" The demon went back towards the food court. "We should get going." He held the shotgun as if it were his only child. Pam pulled Sarah to her feet, then stumbled over to where Mr. Armstrong stood guard. "That was quite an entrance. Why did your bullets affect the demon? I thought demons were immune to things like that." "I soaked each round in ghost peppers. It gives them a bit of a oomph." Mr. Armstrong fixed a fresh drum of the receiver of his weapon. "Let's go." He led the way back to the entrance. Once outside, Pam took in the activity. The fire department was pulling up as the police tried to get the spectators to move back. Hundreds of people from all over town came rushing over to watch while hundreds of shoppers tried to leave. Pandalirium came to her mind. Mr. Armstrong's truck was still parked in front. Paula Bogus walked into her home. She was a bit concerned about her daughter. "I just passed Pam's car. It's parked down the street. It's in front of that weirdo Waldo megalomaniac's house. I hope she's not over there visiting that cretin." Paula set the bag of groceries on the counter. Albert looked out the window, but the angle was all wrong. He couldn't even see the street from here. "Maybe she's over at the Bellums' house. She's the same age as their oldest daughter." "Ugh, that's almost as bad. Have you seen how the mother dresses? You'd think she's 16 years old dressing like that." Maybe she's going through a midlife crisis." Albert then said, "Did you try her phone?" He meant Pam's phone, not Mrs. Bellum's. "No, I want to give her space, but not too much space, so she starts hanging out with weirdos and bumpkins." Paula got busy putting the groceries away. Mr. Armstrong pulled into the parking lot of the bag and went inside. Pam and Sarah were right behind. He stormed up the stairs, heading to his office, while the two girls went in search of coffee. Customers that had gone to the coffee shop stopped what they were doing and stared at the two as they moved through the crowd. Pam had sheetrock dust covering from head to foot. Bits of pieces of colorful handbag hung from her clothes. She was as wet as it was possible to be. Sarah had sparkly rhinestones stuck to her in every conceivable color. She also had several purse straps draped around her shoulders. Her wetness was matched only by her companion. Her hair stuck out in every direction. They placed their orders, acting as if nothing in the world were out of place. The staff barely noticed anything odd, and they greeted the two. Pam carried their drinks over to a far corner. Too many people were busy drinking coffee and checking reference books. "Why is it so crowded in here? It's like they have no place else to go." Sarah sat in one of the overstuffed chairs, rhinestones falling past her feet like snow. Her feet were a foot and a half off the floor. A puddle soon formed under her chair. It's something called the Access Monday. It's when all the spirits in the world will have access to our plane of existence. Pam took the other chair. From what I've read, it's supposed to be kind of weird around here. Weird as in demons chasing us through the shopping malls? Yeah, like that, only more so. Pam was beginning to get a better grasp on just what may happen come Monday. They sat and relaxed for a half hour, and then Pam said, "We should see about getting you back home." "What about my mom? You think she'll be better?" "We did a healing on her, and she should be all better, I think." Pam realized her car was still parked in front of Waldo's house. She was without wheels, and it was a 15-mile walk. She had an idea. Walking over to the counter, Pam asked, "Mr. Techno, is there any way Sarah can get a ride to her house? She tried her best to look poor and helpless." "How about the company car?" "A company car? There's a company car?" "Yes, it's out back in the tool shed." Eddie pointed to the back wall of the coffee shop, which was between them and the next room, which sat between them and the kitchen, which, well, anyway, he pointed in the direction of the shed out behind the mansion. "Where are the keys?" They should be in the ignition. We leave them there so no one has to go looking for them any time the car is needed." "Do I need to tell anyone I'm taking it?" "You just did." Eddie made a note in the spiral notebook. "Pam has car. Top off the gas tank before you return it." He went back to taking orders and talking to his kid. Pam led Sarah out to the huge building that took up most of the rear of the backyard. The grass hadn't been cut in years. Actually, there was very little grass. It was just a bunch of weeds that grew all over the place. As they made their way to the door, a goat came trotting along. Its job was to keep the weeds down to a reasonable size, but the goat didn't much care for the taste, so it ate anything it could other than weeds. At some time, someone had placed a compost bin in the yard near the kitchen door. The goat had pulled the lid off, and now the compost was being mulched inside its digestive tract. It looked as if there was plenty to eat by the size of the goat. The door to the shed was big, and it took both of them to push it and pull the thing far enough to allow the vehicle inside to be moved to the outside. Pam looked in to see what it was she was about to be driving. There it sat. Someone had taken the time to wash and wax this coach the staff all referred to as the company car. It was black with chrome trim. The tires were white-walled, clean and shiny. The glass was spotless. It was a 1970 Cadillac hearse. Sarah was thrilled. "Cool, man, I want one of these when I get older." She ran one hand along the fender. Pam opened the driver's door. The interior was in perfect shape. The car was 10 times as nice as her car, maybe 100. Some kind of a weird-looking electronic device was mounted under the dashboard just below the AM radio. The device had an opening about 2 inches by 6 inches. Sarah looked at this odd mechanism and said, "That looks like a VHS, kind of. Why would anybody have a VHS player in a car?" And Pam asked, "What's a VHS?" "My uncle had one. It only plays things called video cassettes. The movies look kind of icky, and none of the latest movies are available." Pam looked at the contraption and asked, "What's an 8-track?" Sarah held up a plastic box with 8-track written across the front. "One of these, I guess." Underneath the mysterious 8-track was a second odd-looking gadget, also electronic. So what's a CB radio do?" There was a microphone hung from the rear-view mirror. Pam sat down in the leather tuck-and-roll seat, amazed at how well appointed this chariot of death had been fashioned. She ran one hand along the cushion, feeling the luxurious sensation under her fingertips. The dashboard had silver inlay running from one lavish corner to the other. The instrument panel was anything but ancient. She was about to hook the seat belt when, "I don't see any seat belts," Sarah quipped. "Well, you can't use them if you don't have them." "But that's not safe. We might get killed in an accident." Pam was considering not taking the company car after all. "Hey, we might get killed by a demon." Sarah pulled her door shut and made the ready for a trip home look. Her head was just above the dashboard. Pam pulled her door shut and then turned the key. The engine roared to life. It sounded as if the muffler had holes in it. Yikes, and I thought driving Cassandra's pickup was wild. The entire vehicle vibrated with anticipation of hitting the road. Pushing down on the brake, Pam slipped the gear shift into D. As she let off the brake and gave it some gas, the car lunged out the door like a racehorse, striving for the finish line. If not for the driveway being dirt, the rear tires would have screamed along the pavement, squealing like a dragster getting the green light. Pam considered not taking the company car some more. She very much wanted to shut down the engine and head back to her desk. Sarah had other ideas. "Punch it, see what this baby can do." They roared out the driveway, which exited the yard to the side of the mansion. It was just a good thing the gate was already knocked down, as Pam would have smashed it open. The car fishtailed as it hit the dry blacktop and then launched forward. Both girls were pushed backwards into their seats. This was a good thing because it caused Pam's foot to no longer reach the gas pedal. Who souped this thing up? Pam got the seat moved forward enough so that she could reach both the gas and the brake. With great care, she gave the beast some fuel. They sped away en route to Sarah's house, or escape velocity. Pam came to a shaking stop in front of Sarah's house. The Jaguar was parked in the driveway. As she was about to bid a fond adieu to her passenger, she spotted Mr. Armstrong's go-bag sitting on Waldo's porch. Pam wanted nothing better than to drop Sarah off and return this overcharged vehicle of death to the unstately home. But the bag was still there, waiting for somebody to take it home. Sarah looked at Pam and then scooted up to see what she was looking at. You want to grab the go bag, right?" "Yes, but no. It weighs too much and there's no way I want to go near that place again." "Go near? I live near." They sat and waited for the bag to walk over and jump into the rear compartment, back where the dead used to ride. The bag mysteriously did nothing of the sort. Sarah asked, "What do you think?" "This is nuts." Pam let off the brake and slowly crept forward. Once the back door was in line with the porch, she threw the shift lever into park. "Ready?" They both jumped out and ran for the porch, cutting across the grass in their haste. Once at the porch, each grabbed a handle of the case, whichever means was available. The bag had not gone on any kind of a diet in the past few hours. If anything, it had taken on a few pounds of extra weight. Using everything they had, Pam and Sarah got the go bag up and off the porch. They tried to run, but instead they managed a hasty waddle. When finally they arrived at the back door of the hearse, Pam pulled the back open and they hefted the overly abundant case into the body section. Mrs. Megalomaniac came screaming onto the porch. "Where's my boy? You little tarts have done something evil to my boy." Sarah dove into the passenger seat as Pam threw the shift into drive. The tires squealed the rest of the length of the block, leaving 2 black tire marks smoking along its trail. Rounding the corner, they both looked back and then let out squeals of laughter. Pam stopped laughing first. "Shoot, I was supposed to drop you off at your house." "Go around the block, I'll jump out in front of your place and then walk home." Sarah was in a dynamic mood. This had been the best weekend ever. "You got it." Pam made the corner with a little tire wear. Once Pam got back to the office, The sun was dropping. Well, actually, the horizon was moving up. Backing into the garage, she killed the engine and jumped out in a really good mood. She was not deterred by the fact she had to clean the front of the hearse of purse stuffings and rhinestones. The water was slowly drying. Check out, get my car, and head. Oh, once more, Pam had forgotten where she had parked. Cassandra dropped Pam off next to her car. Now, are you going to take tomorrow off and rest up for Monday? You haven't been getting enough rest, and things might get a bit hectic on Access Monday. I would, but I feel as if there's something more I should do to help out at the office. Pam was beginning to feel as if she belonged at the bag. No one will think bad if you stay home and rest. I'll see you tomorrow. Pam shut the door and waved. How was your day at work? Paula asked as they sat down to dinner. The usual paperwork. I drove some. I made some deliveries. Are you spending time with the Bellums' oldest daughter? No, I'm spending time with the youngest daughter, Sarah. Pam went on to explain how they had wound up in Mr. Armstrong's truck, leaving out the demon, and Waldo, and the chase, and the trip through the mall, and the shootout. Corinne called and asked if you wanted to go to the mall Sunday. Oh, I heard the mall was closed. There was some kind of an explosion or something. The place is a mess. Shame on you. Really, that's odd. I wonder what happened. Pam felt just the tiniest bit bad not telling her mother the truth. Where would she begin? Evil child. Chapter 9. Death Threats from a Demon. Pam was at her desk at 10 a.m. She didn't feel late because she wasn't scheduled to work weekends anyway. The waiting room was full. Everyone wanted to see their favorite psychic or get a reading or have some energy healing done. The air felt as if it were filled with static electricity. Some of the folks waiting looked as if they didn't want to wait. But there were only so many staff members to handle their wishes, so wait they must. Jolene came in with Garrett. The science guys wanted to see if the upcoming Access Monday was having any untoward effects on the subject of their scientificking. Have the doctors gotten in yet? They said to meet them here at 10. Pam looked at the status board. Somebody had scribbled 3 scientwits on a piece of paper and fixed it to the board with tape. The arrow was pointed up. It looks like they're in the usual room. Head right up. I'll send some drinks up in a bit. Pam hoped Brissa was here today. She could run errands for a small stipend, and Pam felt as if those stairs were beyond her ability today. Pam had her calculator out. A few pieces of paper with massive calculations jotted on both sides. She was still not sure what her paycheck was supposed to come to. Either I get $450 or I get $45. No, that can't be right. She erased some of her scribblings. The phone rang. This is the bag company. What can we do for you today? Pam was trying some new rejoinders for the telephone. Pam, yes, this is Ray. I was just calling to tell you I was going to make it in today. Yes, today, it's Sunday, correct? Yes, well, I hope everything is well. Yes, well. Oh, everything is just peachy. I was just wondering, how much am I supposed to be paid? Like per hour? Paid, yes, as in wages. Wages. I was meaning to come by to go over the pay scale with you sometime, like Friday maybe. How many hours did you work? How many hours did you work, that is? Well, it'll be 72 by the end of Sunday. Or, correction, Saturday. Oh, well, you should be making, let's see, carry the 1, no, 2. You should be making enough to pay for your college. Yes, pay for college. He mumbled something about community college. See, I was making out everyone's check, and I didn't know how much I put down for myself. And Pam really wanted to get paid so she could give Sarah her money back. She felt like an absolute heel owing the tween $150. Um, What don't you get with. No, he's no longer with us. That was a nasty accident, wasn't it? Yes, nasty. Ray mumbled something about sea serpents. Let's say you get 880, no, 660 after taxes. Yes, taxes and insurance. Insurance? Wow, that's a lot, I think. Pam had no idea if this was a good amount or not. Yes, it's a good amount, I think. A good amount. Pam wrote out the check, filling in all the appropriate boxes: income tax, so security tax, insurance. Boy, I'd be rich if not for the government. She jumped up and was halfway to her car when she remembered it was Sunday. Her bank was closed. Darn it. Pam slunk back to her desk. Back to sending customers on their way to whichever paranormal operative they were seeking, only to be replaced by someone else in need of extrasensory manipulation. Cassandra came out from her office to see who was waiting for her attention. Pam, I told you should stay home and get some rest. Well, I wanted to get paid, and I came in and I got my paycheck only to remember the banks are all closed on a Sunday. I owe Sarah $150 and I can't even pay a tween who has more money than I do. Pam felt quite young and peeved by her ordeal. Just sign it and cash it at the coffee bar. Now, that's what we all do. Cassandra waved to her next customer and then led him back to her office. Coffee bar? Pam hoofed it into the library to see if Eddie could have enough cash to cover her rather large paycheck. Pam got into her car and took a quick drive over to see Sarah. Owing the tween money had kept Pam awake most of the night. Pay what you owe, and what you are owed will be paid. Pam was losing track of the voices in her head. Was this her conscience or the other voice? I wish you'd come up with some useful advice. The weed of evil bears bitter fruit. What's that supposed to mean? Pam turned the radio up to drown out the voices. Pulling up in front of Sarah's house, Pam looked around for the Jaguar. It was nowhere to be seen. Then she looked at the megalomaniac's house. It looked quiet and empty, but then it always looked that way. Slipping out the door, Pam moved at an angle across the front yard so anyone looking out of the megalomaniac's house would not see her. Jumping over the rail of the porch, Pam got to the front door without any drama. She knocked on the door. Mrs. Bellum answered the door after a few seconds. She was dressed as if going to a Halloween party, dressed as a teenage girl. Yes, oh, you're the messenger or the masseuse. I must tell you, I never felt so good. You really know your way around a sore backbone. The woman's hair was made up in two ponytails sticking out either side of her head. Just a bit way too much makeup as well. Pam was lost as to what to say. Is your daughter in? Sandy went to the library, and she was going to go to the mall today, but for some unknown reason, the mall is closed. I wonder why that could be. Pam guessed Sandy was Sarah's older sister, the one with the Jaguar. I was hoping to see Sarah. I have something to give her. Oh, I think she's in the kitchen. Come on in. I'll see if she's there. Pam stood in the living room looking around at the hardly used furniture. It looked like Miss Bellum had staged her home for a photo shoot. Nothing was out of place. From the kitchen, she heard, Sarah, Sarah, wake up. There's someone here to see you. Come on, wakey, wakey. Pam suddenly had a bad feeling. There's something wrong. And you're late as usual. Pam walked to the door to the kitchen and carefully poked her head around the corner. There was Mrs. Bellum standing over Sarah, trying to wake her tween. Sarah was face down on the table, her head cushioned on a plate of pancakes. Syrup was dripping from her nose. Pam moved over to the slumbering girl. Hey, what's wrong? Mrs. Bellum acted as if this was normal behavior for a young girl. It's just an overact into puberty. She's not getting enough vitamins. The smile on her face looked plastic. Pam checked for a pulse. Well, she tried to check for a pulse. Having never done a pulse check before, she had no idea how to start. Pam poked Sarah in the arm. Mrs. Bellum said, Sarah stayed up too late watching TV. I'm sure she'll be all right. I just need a little rest. More plastic smile. Pam looked at Mrs. Bellum in the eye and felt her energy slipping away. It was like a vacuum was being used to pull all of her life force from her soul. Pam tried to look away, but she was trapped in this woman's gaze. The systems cannot stand the strain. Why was Mr. Scotty talking in Pam's head now? Now Pam felt her eyes closing. It was as if all of her get up and go had gone somewhere else. Pam felt completely powerless. A weird kind of a jingling came into her head. It was slowly growing louder. The bells of doom? Was this her life slipping away? The sound kept getting louder and louder. Ring, 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 ring. It was her cell phone, but the ringtone was something new. Pam never had a ringtone that went ring, ring. Pulling the phone from her purse, Pam barely had the energy to answer. Hello? Yes? Who's this? Madam Dingus was on the other end. Pamela, is that you? What are you doing answering the phone? I'm trying to call Barbara. Barbara, what's her last name? Anyway, I must have hit the wrong button. Click, she'd hung up. Pam was now wide awake. Well, kind of awake. Kind of foggy in the head and not sure where she was and what she was doing, but she looked at Sarah snoring into her pancakes. Syrup was puddling around her chin. She looked so peaceful, so passive, so close to death. Pam said, You're a psychic vampire. Oops. Was that out loud? Was that the right thing to say? Mrs. Bellum just made with a plastic smile and said, What was that? You said I was a vampire? The smile looked as fake as any politician's promises. You're a psychic vampire. You're sucking all the energy out of your daughter. Pam figured she'd go for broke. What was the worst thing could happen? Well, Miss Bellum just might kill her. Oh, shut up. The voices in her head began talking some more. Miss Bellum was shocked at being told to shut up before she could even say what she was about to say. Mrs. Bellum just stared. Listen to me. I'm not crazy. Isn't that what crazy people would say? Haven't you noticed how Sarah becomes drained of energy any time you're around her? Oh, yes. Hearing it in her own ears, Pam sounded as crazy as her Aunt Ramona, who was locked up in the state hospital right now. Mrs. Bellum did some more of that staring. You see, it's not something you're doing on purpose. I think it's just that you're striving to stay young, and by doing so, you're feeding on your youngest child. Don't be ridiculous. It sounds like you're saying I'm drinking her blood or something. Not her blood, her energy. Pam was getting ideas that didn't sound like her own thoughts. You draw energy from Sarah, but that leaves Sarah with nothing to run on. Oh, that's just... Miss Bellum became quiet, thinking. Haven't you ever wondered why you feel so much more alive whenever she's around? Oh, I just assumed it was a normal mother-daughter relationship. Mrs. Bellum was looking very concerned now. Sarah blew a huge bubble in the syrup. When it popped, she sat up. Huh? What? She had pancakes stuck to her face. Mrs. Bellum looked at Sarah. Then she looked long and hard at Pam. Could what this teenager said be true? Her head was in a muddle, thoughts trying to force their way into her brain. A light bulb went on over her head. Mrs. Bellum ran to her youngest daughter and crushed her to to her chest. It was a mother-daughter moment. Tears and stuff were running like lava from Mount Calais. Mrs. Bellum wound up with pancakes stuck to her shirt. I'm sorry, and please forgive me, and I hope you don't die, were exchanged, but mostly towards Sarah. The snot wound up smeared down Mrs. Bellum's too-tight t-shirt. Pam felt as if she were imposing on a family moment. Well, I'd best be going then, and she turned for the door, but it was too late. Miss Bellum, overcome with with whatever emotion it was that spilled forth from her motherly interior, grabbed Pam and pulled her to her. Well, she embraced Pam and squeezed her. Pam wound up with pancake and snot smeared all down the front of her dress. Sarah wanted in on this show of emotion, and, well, it became a threesome. Pam got back to work sometime after lunch. She had nipped into her house to get cleaned up and put on something less sticky. She felt oddly elevated. As she peeled off her saturated clothing, she had found some money had been slipped into her pocket. There were three $100 bills, all covered with syrup. Then she found 10 20s with some kind of a bodily fluids on them in her other pocket. With all the crying and hugging going on, it would appear that Sarah and her mother had both given Pam some money in payment for whatever it is she had done. Pam had shoved $150 into someone's pocket. She hoped it was Sarah's and not her mother's. Tight blue jeans all felt the same in a crush. Is this a normal outcome, or was this just a fluke? Pam pulled on her clean outfit, and then, just to show she was her own man, or her own woman, her own girl, she was her own girl, yes, that's it. Pam had laced up her new hot pink running shoes. They didn't go with her dress, but so what? She was creating her own look. Now, back behind her desk, Pam was ready to take on whatever came her way. The phone rang. This is the Bogus Anomalous Group. How may we help you today? Pam tried to sound happy and upbeat. Over the phone, Pam could hear what can only be described as a huge, empty space. Kind of like the inside of the old outhouse. Empty, desolate, lonely, cold, and scary. All of this was coming through the phone line, as if projected into her brain through her ear. Ahem. Is someone there? Hello? You won't live to see the sun set. Screwed that up. You won't live to see the sunrise. The voice was rough and unpleasant, kind of like someone speaking with a mouthful of gravel. Who is this? Pam felt just the tiniest bit uncomfortable about the phone call. The sound of emptiness filled her ear. The click was soft, but still sent a chill down Pam's back. If Bob had poured a glass of ice water down her back, it wouldn't have had any better or worse response. Pam slowly placed the handset back in the cradle. The temperature in her office had dropped about 15 degrees. None of the waiting customers seemed to notice, but Pam had to rub her arms to chase the chill away. Time for something hot to drink. She headed for the library. Eddie looked at Pam and asked, "You okay? You look like you just saw Mr. Armstrong in a bathing suit." Now that was a scary image. Pam told him about the phone call. Other staff gathered around to listen. Manuel Vargas stated, "It could be just a prank, maybe some upset customer." Eddie thought not. "We haven't had many upset customers lately. Mr. Peculus, but the cops have him locked up downtown." Barbara was next. "That demon boy, the one you chased through the mall. It sounds like a demon kind of thing." All the staff were quiet for a bit, digesting this last piece of thought. All the clients quickly moved to the waiting room. All this talk of demons was beyond their comfort zone, to an extreme. Manuel said, "You'll need protection." George pulled his wallet out. "Not that kind of protection. Guns and magic charms, maybe a few security guards." Barbara looked at the shelves around them, looking for a book on demon protection. Eddie had a thought. "What about that young kid you were running around with? Think she might be on the list as well?" Pam thought about it for all of a second. "I'd better call Sarah and tell her to... What? What do I tell her to do?" Everyone moved at once, heading to the shelves, intent on finding a book on magic spells to protect Pam and her friend from demons with munchies for teenage girls. Everyone that is except Wanda Murkowski, who went on thinking about whatever it was she was thinking about. Soon the bar was covered with books and tomes in every size and description. Some were so big it took two people to heft them onto the counter, others so small they vanished between the spaces between other books. Here and there a scroll was set, looking a bit conspicuous. Next to the perusals were commenced. Pages rustled as paragraphs were consumed. Words went into eyes and roamed around inside brains, looking for a place to coalesce with other words and form a solution to Pam's problem. Staff members huddled together in whispered debate, trying to get two or more minds working on one outcome: how to keep Pam and maybe Sarah to not become demon poo by the end of the week. Digestion would be hard on both of them. Are we sure the demon wants to eat her? What if it wants to tear her to pieces instead? Demons eat people, especially girls. My cat keeps bumping against the back of the... Stop it. Shouldn't we try to cast a spell on the mansion so she can just hang out here? Salt. We need salt. We'll pour salt in a circle all the way around the mansion, and the demon is stuck on the other side. For how long? Forever? Demons can't cross a ring of salt. Several of the staff had decided this was the answer till somebody asked, how long would Pam have to stay in the mansion? About maybe forever, too? This convinced them they had saved the day, slipped into a sullen mood. Salt wouldn't work anyway. Look, it's raining. Sure enough, it was driving down outside. Pam had pulled a few books to her end of the counter and was intent on helping find the answer to her salvation. She figured sitting back and letting others save her life was just too 1990s. How to prevent consumption by ravenous bug blaster beasts. Where did that come from? As she looked at the cover of the book she was reading, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Oops, wrong book. It looks like I'm in an earthquake, doesn't it? It's Snowball, and she won't get off the back of the computer. There. Little black cat named Snowball. Anyway, she opened the next volume. It was the book of Bob. Oh, correction. It was the book Bob had dropped off. What was it, just 6 days ago? All the pages were completely empty. Flipping back and forth, there were no words of any kind written on any of the pages. The book was completely blank now. Where did all the words go? Pam scooted the book over to Wanda Murkowski's elbow. Someday it, too, may sit long enough to be covered in dust. Hello? Is anyone here? A voice called from the waiting room. Pam, would you get that? We're all kind of busy here. Madam Dingus seemed to have forgotten who it was they were trying to help. Pam walked out to the waiting room and found it was packed. People were lined up at her desk. All the chairs were being sat on by someone or other. The stairs were being sat on by those who didn't qualify as someone or others sitting on chairs. Pam then realized all the staff were in the coffee shop working on her problem. Pam got busy. Who all is here to have a card reading? As she looked at the hands in the air. Up to the second floor, Madam Dingus will be with you shortly. And crystal ball readings, second floor as well. Ethereal management, third floor, head on up. Mikey or Shri Baba Ganusha will be with you soon. Energy healing, please wait in the corridor behind my desk. Carol Munchausen was currently being pet communications were Carol Munchausen was currently doing pet communications where? Pam looked at the status board and there was a K next to her name. Think, kitchen. Oh, she's in the... Miss Munchausen is doing pet communications in the kitchen. Those waiting with pets in arms or on a leash went to stand at the kitchen door. And now to get the staff back to work. Pam went to the library. There are about 10 people waiting on each and every one of you if you'd like to go attend to their needs. Pam gave them her very best Do me a favor and we'll all be better off. Look, are you nuts? We're trying to save somebody's life here. Madame Dingus stopped and thought a bit. We're trying to save you. You can save me later, but right now we have paying customers. Pam was amazed at the sound of her authority as well as her lack of concern for her future classification as a living, breathing human being. Work now, save my life later. Pam acted as if nothing in the world were wrong. You're becoming a very weird person. Pam grabbed a cup of Americano and headed for her desk. Sarah poked her head through the door. She looked around as if looking for someone. Then, as surprising as it was different, her mother stepped in from the front door. Pam didn't recognize the woman at first. She was dressed like a middle-aged woman with a few kids under her belt. Gone was the teenage adult. She looked normal. We came by a few minutes ago, but this place was packed, Miss Bellum said, as Sarah put in. Mom didn't want people to see her here. They might think she needed a psychic or something. Miss Bellum didn't look a bit apprehensive as she looked around the waiting room. It's just that I always thought this kind of thing was a bit crazy, Pam ended the sentence for her. Oh, no, nothing. Miss Bellum was nodding her head. The silence became deafening. Pam finally asked, So what brings you down here to the bag company? Pam pointed to some seats to get at least Miss Bellum to relax. After you left, that is, Sarah and I, we sat down in the living room. The kitchen was a bit of a mess, and I'll have to give it a good cleaning. I had no idea how much syrup got spilled. Sarah jumped in with, A few minutes ago, some guy called and said I wouldn't live much longer. Miss Bellum got back into the conversation. I answered the phone and somebody said I wouldn't live, and then it stopped and wanted to know who I was. I said, You should know, you called me. Well, then the voice said I, that is me, the youngest member of the Bellum household, would not live to see tomorrow. Miss Bellum came back with, No, dear, it said you wouldn't live to see the sunrise. The two Bellums looked at each other, having a silent argument about the semantics of sunrise as opposed to sun coming up. Pam looked from one to the other. So you, pointing to Sarah, received the same call I did. Sarah nodded. Her mother shook her head, but in a worried kind of way, not a negative to what Pam had said. It's a good thing you came by. The staff was just in the process of looking for spells to ward off demons. Sarah looked just the tiniest bit relieved. Wouldn't it be better to come up with a spell to destroy the demon instead? Pam said yes, but in order to do that, we have to know the demon's name. All the pages of the book, Pam was assuming Sarah and her mother would know which book she referred, are blank. So we have no way of knowing who the demon is, so we can banish it from the planet. Miss Bellum was growing concerned for her daughter. Now that she was no longer draining the life from her, she didn't want anything bad to come of her youngest. So is there something you can do? Something that will keep Sarah, and of course yourself, alive? I hope so. I kind of had plans for the summer. Pam sat next to Sarah and wondered what to do next. The customers slowly filtered out. As the excess Monday grew near, the restlessness grew restless. Few understood the coming event, but they all knew something was up and they wanted relief from whatever was picking at their unseen inner self. They needed to scratch that inner itch. Soon all the staff were back in the library, poring over volumes of ancient texts, trying to find that one useful item that would end the threat to the receptionist. Even Madame Dingus wanted to keep Pam alive, not because she was fond of Pam, but because her last paycheck not only had been correct, it had been on time as well. Coffee cups covered every surface, some still steaming, others as cold as a cold coffee. Eddie had sent his daughter Brissa around to round up all the empty cups, and then he sent her around to gather up any that were cold. Once the pile was too big to ignore, the cups were sent to the kitchen for a good cleaning. Good cleaning. Is there such a thing as a bad cleaning? Well, maybe a GI shower. It took several trips and a lot of lifting and setting things down. Carol Munchausen was just finishing up with a Doberman pinscher who felt his caretaker was acting a bit of a putz by dressing him in a tuxedo. The pinscher wanted to be dressed like a clown because deep inside he felt funny. A Prince Wappo was sleeping on the top of the old fridge. It gave off more heat than it made cold, but nobody really put anything in it, so it wasn't bound to be replaced anytime soon. The creamers were all kept in a junior-sized fridge in the coffee bar. As Brissa was busy loading the sink with used and dirty cups, the prince rolled over onto his side and watched. He was wondering if the girl would make a good belly rub or back scratcher. Some folks were meant to pet cats, and others were sorry at any kind of a contact between hand and fur. When the girl in question turned on the water and began swishing suds around, the prince decided she was too free with the wet stuff. That was a deal breaker for sure. He did a quick paw washing and then went to search for somebody less soggy. The pile of used coffee cups was twice as high as the top of Brissa's head. She needed a step stool to get started. As the water heated up, her glasses fogged up, making the mess not quite so daunting. She would never have ever even thought once about tackling such a mission, if not for the $20 Eddie had promised. She would have found a quiet spot in the library to sit back and enjoy the latest Terry Pratchett novel. Such is life. The library was fast becoming a disaster area. Anyone just coming in would have believed the room had been hit by a tornado. Books were set down on any surface that might accommodate them. Some were being held down by coffee cups. Others were being held up by coffee cups. The floor was fast becoming unpassable due to the piles of tomes cropping up everywhere. Eddie was wondering just who was going to reshelve all of those homeless volumes. He checked his wallet to see if he had enough money to buy his kids' services. Looks like I'll have to bring in the other 4 as well. Pam had wound up sitting next to Wanda Murkowski. The woman unnerved her just a bit. If you looked really close, you might just catch her slowly breathing in and out. So slow, it was almost an illusion. Ever so often, one of the staff would come over and open the book used to summon the demon. They would flip through a few pages, hoping to decipher this wordless manuscript. Manuel was currently pawing through a blank pages. This thing is unreal. I saw words in here when it first came to us. Now there's nothing but unoccupied sheets. He left the book sitting open on the counter. Prince Wappo saw a book that looked as if it was about to be pursued by one of the humans, so he jumped up and spread his considerable furry girth across the open folio. Looking around, he found nobody was disturbed by his actions, but he didn't feel like moving, so he just dropped off to sleep. Someone is going to want to read this thing, and I'll be ready to interfere, he thought to himself. Cassandra looked around the room. Has anyone found anything that might be the slightest bit useful? I found a great recipe for making horseradish donuts. I located a text that proves who shot JFK, but I seem to have misplaced it. Cassandra grew unhappy. Well, as close to unhappy as she'd ever grew. She just slightly frowned. It's already 9:25. The sun will come up at 6:45. If we don't find something soon, Pam might just not be with us. She couldn't bring herself to say what everyone knew was coming. Is it too late to take out a heavy insurance policy on her? Cassandra was nearly less cordial after that question. No, wait. Yes, it's too late, and that's not very nice. She gave the room her best shame-on-you look. There were a few that thought it might be worth a try. It looks like she's doomed anyway. We've exhausted the library. All the books have been gone over at least twice. Pam felt just the slightest bit uneasy as her new friends were contemplating making money off of her coming demise. Barbara came walking into the library with several big shopping bags. She set them down next to Pam's chair. Just in case, she opened one showing the contents filled with salt. Pam was grateful but asked, "What am I to do? Keep circling myself with salt?" "Yes, until we can come up with a better idea." Mrs. Clark came in, along with her son Garrett. They'd been running some card drills to see if the excess Monday was having any effect on his abilities. He had scored 100% as always, which meant there was no increase in his psychicness. "I just wanted to grab a quick cup for the road. Garrett, you want anything?" Garrett was looking at Prince Wapo. He reached over and gave the cat a few strokes. Prince Wapo checked to be sure the boy didn't have anything sticky on his hands before allowing any more attention. He rolled around to get a better petting position. Garrett began to laugh. "It says flatulentium. That sounds painful." He was looking at the page the prince was currently occupying. Everyone in the room stopped and stared at Garrett. Over near the ladder, somebody dropped a pen. It went patwing. Cassandra looked at Garrett. Then the book, which was still blank. "Where does it say flatulentium?" "On the other side of this page." He smiled from ear to ear, showing off his bizarre talent. All the psychics gathered around looking at the page that still held no words. "What else does it say?" More in disbelief than actual question. "It says, I, the mighty one and only flatulentium, will devour your soul and all those around you." Garrett spoke loud enough anyone in the next room would have no trouble hearing his articulation. "Wait a second." Eddie lifted the edge of the page just enough to peek under the sheet. He could just make out letters. As he lifted the page, the letters all vanished, as if hiding from the light, like a room full of cockroaches. It was Jolene that finally caught on as to what was doing. "He can read what's on the other side, like what he does with the Zener cards." Garrett said, "See, I told you it wasn't a trick. It's psychic stuff." He beamed with self-gratified exuberance. Carol Munchausen spoke up. "Prince Wapo says he could have told us that had anyone bothered to ask." She gave everybody an apologetic look. "That's what he said." "Okay, and now we know his name. What do we do next?" Pam was ready to be done with this eaten by demons episode of her life. The room erupted into more chaos as the staff all got busy making their next plan, which was actually their first plan, but nobody wanted to think they hadn't come up with anything in the first place. "Okay, first thing we need to get Mr. Armstrong down here. His unique way of dealing with demons and such might come in handy." Cassandra started handing out assignments. "We need to find a place wide open to draw the demon out. We sure don't want a repeat of last time." Pam had to ask, "What happened last time?" "You see that building across the street?" Pam thought about what wasn't across the street. "There's nothing there but a burned out shell of a house. It used to be a mansion like this one, till the last demon extrication. Your grandfather chased some demon-possessed customer in there. That was the last time anyone saw him. Or your grandfather. And the customer, too. Come to think of it, we never got paid for that one either." Oh, Pam considered this was probably a bad thing. "I kind of get the impression this demon thing isn't any safer than what we know its name." "Not a bit. It just gives us the ability to fight it, not a guarantee we'll win." "Maybe we should use the old state park. They kind of owe us, and there aren't a lot of people there on a Sunday night." Carol handled this question. "No, the park people kind of objected to us dragging demons and wild people around through their estate. Remember that centaur we accidentally released in Garner last spring? Well, that was a mess." Several of the staff nodded in remembrance of a job gone slightly wrong. And with that, I will break. It's time for the next exciting episode. So if you're enjoying the story so far, be sure and turn in for, is it number 6?
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?